The big story in town is Dominic Cummings. It is quite extraordinary, the press conference where Boris Johnson stood in. It was supposed to be at 4 o'clock and then suddenly it all moved to 5 o'clock. Quite what they were doing in that hour between the two, I have no idea. Meanwhile, we need to find out what was perhaps happening behind the scenes and maybe what happens going forward. Who better than Alastair Campbell, former Director of Communications for Tony Blair. Alastair, very good morning to you.
Hi, James.
There are lots of ways in which I could describe this. Some of them would get me hauled off air. If you were advising Boris Johnson, what would you say to him?
Well, there'd be no point me advising Boris Johnson because he doesn't have the moral compass that most prime ministers have. So there's no point me really speculating about that. And that's what I think I feel so strongly about this is that, I mean, even when somebody like Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, I opposed an awful lot of what she stood for. I didn't agree with an awful lot of the things that she did, but I never felt ashamed when she was described as being the British Prime Minister. I actually think what Boris Johnson displayed yesterday was utterly shameful. I think it was followed around the world. I've been looking at some of the foreign media this morning. It further reduces us to the role of a bit of a laughingstock. And there's a more serious thing. It's not really about Dominic Cummings, although he's the figure at the centre of this. Let's just be absolutely clear what's been gone on in the last few weeks. Because of Boris Johnson's indifference and his callous incompetence in relation to the virus, tens of thousands of people more died than should have done. And now, as you just heard from Kirsty Blackman and the SNP and so many other people now feel, including these experts on stage, the medical and scientific advisors, in undermining his own lockdown rules, which he's now done, he's going to put more lives at risk. And that is utterly unforgivable. And I think it's really important that people don't... I get why you're doing the whole thing, leave, remain, should you leave, should you remain, and I get that. But this is so much more important than being about Dominic Cummings. And, I wrote a blog last night in reaction to the press conference, and I made the point that we all think these sort of things can't happen in our country. We think we're a sort of superior democracy. But this is no better or worse than Trump or Orban in Hungary. This is people, a right-wing cabal, who want power by pretending to be standing for the people against the elite. They are their own self-serving elite. And people need to wake up.
Can I just take a step back? Because I understand all of those arguments. However, if one has a look at what Dominic Cummings did and why he did it, the defence would be that he has children and he wanted to do the best for them and to make sure that if he or indeed his wife were to come down with this, there was somebody able to look after them. Young children, perhaps health issues relating to those young children. You've got to respect that decision, haven't you?
I respect that decision for every other person who faced exactly the same decision. I've just been for a swim in the Serpentine in Hyde Park. I got stopped by somebody coming out who told me that their circumstances was in an absolute rage because they, who have got nothing to do with the government, who work in a completely different sector, they said they've got exactly the same position. And actually he said that they have a child who's disabled. And they thought, should we go and actually stay with somebody else just in case we get ill? And he said, no, we didn't because we followed the government rules. So I'm sorry, I don't have any sympathy for this whatsoever. Added to which, it's important to realise they didn't get extra childcare. I even wonder, given how, was Dominic Cummings even ill? As for his wife, that's just the other thing that goes to the heart of this. Let me just say very, very bluntly, we are governed now by a bunch of liars. And his wife wrote a piece in The Spectator. She read it out on the BBC. Bizarrely, the Today programme gave her a platform to read about how much she loved her husband. And she said that they'd spent the time in London lockdown. That was a very interesting choice of words. And go and read the whole piece. I hesitate to let people, but just go and read the whole piece. Pack of lies to defend the indefensible. No, and then
I do. Again, I understand that. There are those who would say 'twas ever thus that we were governed by lies. We can remember weapons of mass destruction and all sorts of other things that have been uttered by...
You can throw that... No, sorry, James, you're not going to throw that one in. You can throw that one in if you like. However...
I just did.
Yes, I know you did. And there have been several public inquiries. And I look forward to the public inquiry into this one, because these people have killed tens of thousands of people. And the one thing that came through that inquiry, of all the correspondence that was shown and all the rest of it, is the incredible lengths that we went to make sure that we told the truth. And what's more, yesterday you saw a Prime Minister stand at the lectern and say things that were not true and that he knew not to be true. You've seen the Cabinet, day after day, the last couple of days, Cabinet Ministers cutting and pasting tweets to save Dominic Cummings. As was obvious from the Grant Shapps interviews yesterday, they don't have a clue whether it was true or not. You're talking, James, please do not equate these charlatans, because that's what they are, with people who are dedicated to public service, who understand that government is about governing for the people, not for themselves.
Fine. Let me just ask this also. There are those who will say that the fierce response to this, to one person's actions that they thought were right, whether you agree with him or not, the fierceness is that people behind the scenes know how effective Dominic Cummings is. He won the Brexit argument, and he won that for the British people. He also helped Boris Johnson secure that election win that was so devastating for Jeremy Corbyn and indeed the Labour Party, of which you were once part. This is the reason that the views are so violent and vehement against him. It's because he's a threat and people want him out.
I don't believe that the reaction is violent and vehement. I think if you actually, and this is why, and also amongst the people who have been reacting in the way what you call a violent, vehement way, are many, many Conservatives, people who voted for these people, MPs who were elected by Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings' strategy.
So what happens next? Do you think this continues to go? Do you think that this story continues to rumble? You've been in so many situations where you've seen a story and sort of almost develop this. If it becomes a story and remains a story for 5 days or however long, something has to happen. Do you think that this becomes one of those situations?
Well, I don't know, and also I don't know if I did ever. I know it's been attributed to me, but I think it goes beyond whether this is a story that runs and runs. It's not about the media. It's about standards in public life, and unless we have a position where the public can all feel that we all abide by the same rules, then I'm afraid society breaks down. That's why this is so serious, and people really have to get their heads around this. What they will be hoping is that it's a nice bank holiday. People will think, oh, God, I can't be bothered listening to this nonsense anymore. We'll move on. And then they'll think, well, let's try and we'll put out some stuff about schools. We'll put out this, that and the other. The media will move on. It's not about that. It's about the rights and wrongs. And to see that guy Cummings come out of his house, insult the media, basically then say, it's not about how it looks, it's about doing the right thing. How was it the right thing to break the government lockdown rules, whatever the circumstances? And I'll tell you the other reason, James, why people are rightly angry about this. And this isn't a violent reaction. This is just people's basic decency. So I'm not remotely special in this at all. But I'm just take me as one individual, and every single person in this country will have these stories. I've had 2 close friends who've died in the last 2 months, whose funerals I couldn't attend. We've had a new family member born up in the north of England. Nobody apart from the parents has been able to go and see them. Why? We've got a close friend in hospital that neither we nor their family can go and see. Not a COVID patient, by the way, but no visitors allowed because of the COVID situation. Why, in these circumstances, should one person, because he's a friend of the Prime Minister, close to the Prime Minister, and worse than that, Johnson, okay, I've known Johnson for a long time. I've known he's a charlatan for a long time. But the Cabinet, we're a Cabinet government. We're governed by a Cabinet. And to see them the other day cut and paste lines to take and put them out as tweets about, it's about the children, he did what her father did. The insult that sends to every other parent who didn't actually go and do these things. That is, James, this is not... This goes beyond the normal.
Okay, fine. Let me ask you, as somebody who's in that world, that director of communications for a prime minister role, even though you disagree with every single sinew and aspect, do you respect? Do you have time for? Do you have, I don't know, any almost, I don't know, sort of sentiment that makes you think that this guy is an extraordinary operator if he gets away with this?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, any more than I have any respect for the fact that they won the referendum in large part by lying and breaking the law. You've got to go beyond this. And it's not a game. I saw a lot of the media coverage last night, and I saw the guy
You
from the
say lying and breaking the law, but everybody lied.
In what?
And that was the problem.
Yeah, I agree. That, listen, the referendum was an absolute low point in the history of British democracy. There's no doubt about that. Both campaigns were terrible. But look, of course he's an effective operator, but it's quite easy to be an effective operator when you have a boss who is prepared to tolerate the kinds of things that you do. And I saw a thing yesterday, somebody said on Twitter, if this had been Alastair Campbell, Tony Blair would have thrown him under a bus and set the bus on fire and got the journalists to come along with pee to put out the fire. Well, one, I wouldn't have done it. Two, I would never, ever, ever have put my Prime Minister, my leader, my boss, in the sort of position that Cummings has done to Johnson. Now, he's either got something on him very, very big, or we just exposed something that I've always known for a long time, which is Johnson deep down knows he can't do this job. He is an amoral, he is an incompetent, he is a lazy, selfish person who, for some ridiculous reason, has become Prime Minister. And honestly, today is the day those cabinet ministers, I hope, even if one of them is listening to this, find a spine, say to Boris Johnson in that cabinet Zoom call today, Boris, you helped us win the election. You've got a lot of qualities, but this is doing massive damage to us, and it's going to do damage to the country. And if we
There's
have
no
to go
damage,
into lockdown,
it's doing huge amounts of damage. Just very quickly and finally to you, Alastair, as we think going forward and as we look at all of the noise and all the bluster that we see, Sir Keir Starmer has clearly demonstrated that he's great in opposition, but he hasn't yet put any forward sort of leadership in terms of whether it's new ideas or otherwise. Is this his opportunity?
Well, look, it's very difficult to be the leader of the opposition at a time in terms of putting forward a forward agenda when you're in the middle of a national crisis. And actually, I think Keir Starmer, the criticism I thought you were going to put there, because it's the one that I hear from time to time, is he's not putting the boot in. But actually, I think what Keir Starmer is doing is showing that you can have serious politics, serious informed questioning. And I think he's also laying down some of the lines that are going to become absolutely fundamental to the public inquiry into this, which Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings will do everything to avoid. And that's the other thing that you in the media have got to be absolutely rigorous about. These people cannot be allowed to get away with the idea that at the end of this, there is not an absolute rigorous judicial independent inquiry. Tens of thousands
I'm sure there will be, Alastair, and there are plenty of skeletons which have been buried here, there, and everywhere with decisions taken and situations. And I'm sure we will want to speak again. Alastair, we must leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Alastair Campbell, former director of communications for Tony Blair, not holding his punches in respect of either Boris Johnson, his government, or Dominic Cummings and their conduct.